So I'm Lyria Bennett Moses. I'm Director of the Allens Hub for Technology, Law and Innovation at UNSW Sydney in Australia.
And I'm Katina, the Director for the Centre for Engineering Policy and Society here at Arizona State University. And I've got an old friend with me here. Lyria, I think I met or learnt about you very long ago, maybe 2004 or 5. The most uncanny story, Lyria probably doesn't remember this, but one of my faculty executive managers said, "Look, we found somebody on the web that looks like you. We don't really look alike, do we?" But the thing is, I ended up looking at this profile shot and then got in touch. I said, "Hello, Dr. Bennett. Hi." I said, "This is probably serendipity, but somebody thinks I look like you, and you've got an amazing profile." I think that's how it started. I think that's what it was. It was Sonia Jennings at Wollongong University. Lyria.
Oh, there you go.
Who connected us.
Okay, so, right, my first memory, and maybe it's just that my memory's not as good as yours, was at ISTAS, and we worked out we had a mutual friend.
Was it?
Which was Sharon.
Sharon
Phillipson.
Oh, yeah. So we did have that in
So
common.
I remember that connection, and I remember talking to you about that. But anyway, there you go.
So Sharon Phillipson, a wonderful lady who I finished a Bachelor of IT with at the University of Technology, Sydney, and you happened to go to school with Sharon.
Yes. So that was my memory, but maybe there was other things before that.
So we've done some amazing things together. We've studied at the same time, I should say in parallel. We didn't really do things together until much later, and we're still thinking about what we'll do together into the future. But we had a lot of parallels. I think we entered academia at the similar times. We went into industry at the similar times. We had kids at the same time, I think, or nearly the same time.
So yeah, close enough.
And I think we're both professors at a similar time.
I think you got there a long time before me.
I don't know. Well, tell me about the Allens Hub.
Okay, so the Allens Hub is a collaboration between Allens, which is a law firm in Australia, and UNSW Law. So it comprises essentially a group of about 40 academics. It's not a centre in the sense that we employ all of those 40 academics. They work for the faculties, mostly the law faculty, although also engineering and business and arts and social sciences faculties as well. But they affiliate themselves with the hub, and we try to foster collaboration around issues at the intersection of law and technology, and that can be everything from questions around smart contracts, blockchain, through to questions around how data analytics is being used in various contexts, whether that's law enforcement, whether that's in court systems, through to questions around how we can actually build tools using sort of things like expert systems to enhance access to justice. So a whole wide variety of projects.
That's really fantastic. I think bringing students and stakeholders together is very powerful, particularly in the legal sector. I was very fortunate to be at your institution. In fact, ASU and UNSW have a collaboration called the Plus Alliance, and I'm really happy that after so many years we're formally now trying to collaborate together and bring our different research areas together. But I was there when you launched, I think it was a new degree and the Allens Hub with Muriel Hildenbrand.
Yeah, right. No, so sort of separating out two different elements of that. One of the things we're doing as a hub is to have international guest speakers in a sort of lecture series. And so Professor Muriel Hildenbrand came out and did the inaugural hub lecture, which was amazing and is available on YouTube.
I love it.
For anyone who's interested, I'm sure we can get the thing put down the bottom. And that was really fabulous. But it was also roughly the same time that through the extended committee structure, we have a new dual degree program, which I was very much pushing and was really excited got approved through the university. And what it is it's a data science and decisions law degree. Okay. So law in Australia is taught as an LLB program, but you have to, at UNSW, combine it with another degree program. So you can't do straight law, you can do science law, arts law, almost everybody does commerce law. And I really wanted to bring the two together. So data science and decisions was the perfect degree program for me to link with law. It is a 3-faculty degree program involving mathematics, which is in the Faculty of Science, computer science, which is in the Faculty of Engineering, and also sort of business, which does obviously a lot of programs around decision making. So taking all those threads together, and you major in one of the three, right. But you gain experience in all three. And the reason why this is important is that, I suppose, a number of things. For me, why it's important. Yeah. The first thing is that most of the current applications that are being used by lawyers are being used, and they're being designed by people who don't understand law and used by people who don't understand data science. Yeah. And so what you get is, to put it probably not very mildly, stupidity. And look, I'm not saying everything is terrible, but yes. You get some really, really terrible applications. So right. To give you an example, I'll give you an example of one that is being used actually in the United States. Mm-hmm. So this is a tool called Compass. It is meant to assess the risk mm-hmm. that someone who might have already committed an offence right. will go on to commit an offence again. You're right. So how does it assess the risk? Right. It draws on data, right? So this is what it is doing. It is basically saying this person is like, according to relevant variables, people who have gone on to reoffend in the past, mm-hmm. right? Now, if you're using that in some kinds of circumstances, mm-hmm. it might be completely appropriate, right? Yeah. So if you're using it, for example, as it was originally designed for, mm-hmm. say, a sort of prison management type tool, yes. where you could try to work out, who to put not next to who to avoid fights in prison or something like that, I think, maybe you can make a case for risk assessment, but that was not the limitation of the use to which this is being put. There was a whole variety of things that occurred, one of which was endorsement from a conference of chief justices in the United States to say we should be using these tools essentially for more functions, and things like bail decisions, parole decisions, and perhaps most controversially, sentencing. So you've got someone who has committed an offence, who's been found guilty, and the judge has to decide how they're going to serve their sentence. What should the non-parole period be, for example, right? And traditionally, of course, this has been based in part on what the judges called risk. And how did they measure risk? They did things like, this person has committed 5 offences already, and 3 of those were violent, and so forth. So, based on that, based on the fact that the distance between offences wasn't that long, and so forth, they might go, this person is high risk, right. And therefore we are going to give them a extended non-parole period because we think they need more time before they will be ready to go back into the community. Mm-hmm. But all of those things, note, are about that individual. That's right. Right? They're all things that individual has done, and you're judging them based on their own conduct. Mm-hmm. Now, and I'm not going to pretend for 1 minute here that this was all a completely neutral process. There's a lot of evidence of various things that go wrong in sentencing. There's evidence of racial bias, for example. Mm-hmm. Not only, interestingly, the race of the offender, but also the race of the victim. Right. So there's some evidence in the United States that if you offend against a white victim, mm-hmm. you're more likely to get a harsher sentence and so forth. So the system was not perfect, and I don't want to create any illusions that it was. But the challenge of something like using data analytics in that context, where you have judges that don't understand how the risk scores are formed, is that it creates other problems. So when this was endorsed by the Chief Justices, you can read it and it's like, this is going to be scientific, this is going to be objective, this is going to fix things, right, that might otherwise be wrong in the system. But what happens, right? Well, the first thing is that if you actually look at the questionnaire, and you can get a copy of this because it's available online, that is the data that is fed into this. Right. It asks a whole lot of questions that would not be admissible as evidence in court. Mm-hmm. Right? So, for example, one of the questions is around, are your parents still together? Right. And if not, how old were you when they split? Right. Right. It asks questions about whether your parents have a criminal record, whether your friends have a criminal record, whether, not even a criminal record in some cases, whether your friends have been arrested, all sorts of questions like this. And what do you think it's learning about people through all of these kinds of questions, right? It's not necessarily about what people have done.
Yes.
It's all about what kinds of communities people live in and what kinds of
who
families they come from,
Tell
right?
me who your friends are.
And so you have, if you like, an inbuilt tool for discrimination. And of course, that is what has occurred with this tool. And ProPublica wrote an article finding that, in fact, there is a higher rate of false positives in the African American community. So that is a higher number of people who get a high risk score who, in fact, don't go on to reoffend in the African American community compared to the white community. So it is still generating racial bias, except the judges who don't understand anything about data, statistics, that kind of reasoning can call it scientific and pretend that this isn't happening. So it's that mix. So going back to the degree program, I actually think to answer what role should a tool like that have in the legal system, you need people who understand what law is about, who understand what sentencing is for, the different roles sentencing plays within the criminal justice system, who understands about evidence and what kinds of factors should be relevant for judicial decisions, but who also understands about data analytics. So going back to the Compass tool, here's the question. What does fair mean? Right? Because here's the other thing about that tool. I've already explained how it was racially unfair in one sense, right? Because you had the higher false positive rate in the African American community. But the answer that the company gave who manufactured it in response to the ProPublica article was, no, it is fair. We have a different metric of fairness. Our metric of fairness is that a particular risk score has the same meaning independent of race.
Okay.
It's a different metric, right? So that a score of 7, for example, a person is as likely to reoffend, white people who get that score are as likely to reoffend as African Americans who get that score. Okay? And on that test, it passes.
Wow.
Now, mathematically, impossible to satisfy both tests at the same time. Right? But you need to understand the data science and the mathematics to get that and to understand why that might be the case. Right? So you can never develop a fair tool in every metric of fairness simultaneously.
To satisfy everyone.
So it comes back to me to a deeper question, right? If you're looking at something like this in the legal system, it comes back to actually asking, okay, what kinds of things, what do we want sentencing to look like, right? Do we want in sentencing to say the reason you're serving this kind of a sentence rather than that kind of sentence, the reason you've got a longer non-parole period, for example, is because of the conduct of people like you. And in fact, not even the conduct, because no data set that is stored anywhere, police, courts, anywhere else they're getting the data from, is an accurate reflection of the world. Right? Crimes are committed all the time.
That's right.
And we don't know about most of them. We only know about the ones that end up on police databases, court databases, and so forth. So, and there are biases in how policing is done, biases in what goes through to the court system. So any data set you pick is a skewed, systemically biased sample, right? So now you're saying, okay, let's take someone who understands all of that. And who understands about evidence and about the criminal justice system and sentencing. Let's have people who can do both. Because I don't think we're going to get appropriate applications. And there will be many appropriate applications of data science in law. But we're not going to get the appropriate applications unless we get people with that interdisciplinary expertise.
I think that's marvellous and something we should all be striving for in our own disciplines. I remember when I did my national security law degree at Wollongong, coming together and across how do judges interpret DNA evidence? How do judges interpret GPS evidence? And so I think what you've really tackling here is the education and awareness of emerging technologies within the court system at large, within policing, I know that a lot of misinterpretation has happened and has been acknowledged as happening. When DNA evidence first started being admissible in court, and GPS coordinates actually, a stream of GPS, tell me where the person's gone, and then you have about 50 pages of their location details.
And to solve that, you need two things.
Tell me.
Right? And this is what we've been working on at UNSW in our faculty. You need to work out, what does everyone finishing a law degree need to know about technology?
Right.
In other words, what does, what should be the baseline for lawyers of the future?
Yes.
Right? And to me, there's a baseline, right? That the very least, you have to have a sense of what data-driven reasoning is. You have to have a sense of what DNA evidence is and what it means, and someone has to explain the prosecutor's fallacy to you, right?
Yes.
So you have to have basics, but you don't need to, just as a core element in a law program, go to what, for example, the dual degree program is doing, right? But you do need to have that. And what we've been doing is we've been working out, okay, what is core? So if you're going to learn contracts, for example, you should know at least enough about the sort of blockchain smart contracts world to be able to answer the question, is this a contract? And by the way, the answer is usually no, even if it's called a smart contract. But you need to understand how to apply the law to what people are building over here.
Wow.
Right? So that's what everyone needs to be able to do. But at the same time, you also need people, which doesn't need to be everybody, but you certainly need people who can operate at the intersection in a truly cross-disciplinary way. And those people can't be fly-by-night, I had a half-hour class on this. Those people need to have done the same degree program as the other experts in that discipline.
Fantastic.
So that no one, so that they can kind of talk back to them and say, that's not the kind of prediction we mean in the legal system in this context.
So fluency, we keep talking about this at SFIS in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society, how important that is. I think we have 38 disciplines represented in the school, and we only have about 50 staff, faculty that is. So it's like all of these people coming together, it's like an explosion of knowledge systems, an explosion of disciplines coming together to discuss global challenges. And in the same way, I imagine that's what you're really talking about. It's someone that can not only walk the walk, and talk the talk, but actually has had their hands dirty through an assignment, through some exposure.
Absolutely.
In the data science and the maths and the law.
Absolutely. And I think that is, people who can actually bring both and look at a problem and use multiple methodologies to attack the same problem, they're rare, people who can do that, but I think they're absolutely crucial when you're looking at, to me, that is perfect. So it's at the moment the way the education system works. When I say the education system, I mean, I'm talking mostly about the Australian one because it's the one I know best.
Yes.
Is you go through primary school, right? And that's fine. You just have one teacher and they kind of teach you everything. You hit high school and suddenly you do mathematical reasoning with that teacher, scientific reasoning with this teacher, historical reasoning with this teacher, and so forth. And pretty much that's all the way through high school. And then you start selecting subjects, and so you're not even doing all of the subjects anymore. Then you go to university, and in Australia, and this is, I know, a bit different in the US, you do one degree program. And you are pretty much usually in one faculty, and in law you have to do two faculties, and you get tutored in one discipline. Now, that can be great, and we need people who can be, the brilliant mathematician and that's what they do, or the brilliant lawyer and that's what they do.
Right.
But I actually think the more, as the world goes forward, as technology is not just something that happens over here that engineers do, and as technology is being applied in law, in medicine, in techniques in social science, right? Does it really make sense anymore to think of the education system in that way? Or can we think about how to create people who can, as a routine thing, do cross-disciplinary reasoning?
That brings us to a great segue. And I love your thinking. I agree with you very much, Lyria, on where we're going. That brings us to cross-disciplinary studies and degrees like the one you're offering through the law school that brings the data science and the law together, which I think is incredibly innovative. I think you're going to have a lot of students signing up because they have an interest in both. And I was in a class not so long ago here at ASU, and one of the students said, where do you teach? I want to know what you're doing. Tell me about the next courses. And I said, well, I can tell you about a course that's in motion, and that's called PIT. It's a Master's in Public Interest Technology, just like you've had public interest law being defined as an area. Public interest technology is something that's gaining traction here in America through the New American Foundation, through the Ford Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, Mozilla Foundation, and a lot of organizations and institutes are jumping on board. This is more than just teaching a group of students something about science and technology policy. It's about merging these disciplines like science technology studies, STS, with hardcore engineering, getting people who are responsible for engineering design to be able to talk about environmental justice, to talk about social justice issues, to talk about transparency and equity, universal service obligations, to talk about different applications, but with the user in mind. And so this course that we've proposed here at ASU is going to take people through 4 core classes. We have a Principles of Public Interest Technology, followed by Co-Designing for the Future, followed by Conducting Technology Assessments of all types, and Public Engagement Strategies. And then the student says, right, I've got these 4 core areas that are critical for industry, critical for government, as we go through these digital transformations. And now I want to specialize in this flavor. Maybe it's communications. Maybe I want to specialize in law. Maybe I want to specialize with these skills in the context of IT and decision systems engineering, as we have here. So people get to choose 6 classes that align with where their intention is going. So they've got a core 4 classes where they are taken through a process of here I am gathering user requirements and co-designing with users, proposing forward a project where I've actually understood the impact of what I'm proposing, right? It's not like there's a technology, deploy it, people will come and I get money. It's more like, what do people out there actually need? How can we garner the data and information and knowledge systems that we have to actually address the issue? How can we conduct impact assessments to look at social implications, look at environmental justice is being achieved, look at the fact that our system may harm ecologies? How do we actually become aware engineers? And what you usually find in most engineering schools is that people think it's not their problem. Societal issues, cultural issues, economic issues. I just design. I'm just an engineer. That's all. What about this ethics stuff? That's not for me. And what we want is for people to come through this with an intent of where they want to go at the end of it. Is it to volunteer for an NGO? Is it to start up a not-for-profit organisation that looks at housing, perhaps, for the homeless? Is it to create some kind of digital transformation within government that actually looks at the needs of Native people?
I actually think that what you're describing is brilliant.
Thank you.
I teach a course which is coming completely the opposite direction.
Right.
No. To get to the same place, but from the opposite direction. So law students, taking a course called Designing Technology Solutions for Access to Justice.
Oh, fantastic.
Right? So I've got people who know about the access to justice challenges.
Yeah.
Right? And we teach them very basic tech skills.
Fantastic.
How to build an expert system. Right?
Yeah.
And they have to partner with, they actually through the course partner with a not-for-profit.
Yes.
Work out the needs of that organisation.
Fantastic.
And build the system, right? That will then be able to be used to help that organisation deliver services for access to justice. So it's interesting that you've got the engineers coming to understand, the world and what else might be involved. And I've got the lawyers who, might be looking at how to, provide legal information and legal services more broadly to the community, learning the technical skills to actually help make it happen. So I think there's, but these kinds of things are great, right?
They're fantastic.
Because I don't believe that if we take the profound problems in the world, that any one discipline has the answer.
I agree. There's no silver bullet solution.
There's no silver bullet solution. The innovation that you can do by bringing two things together is more powerful right, than the innovation you can do just
On your own.
well, or not just on your own, but solving a problem using only one discipline.
Yes, that's what
method,
I meant. With your own discipline.
Yeah.
So I think that this brings together a lot of jobs, actually. This brings new talent, new kinds of jobs that we've never heard the job types of, right? So you're looking at the paper, a lot of our students coming through the Bachelor of Innovation in Society are looking at what are their future jobs, right? Is it traditional engineering jobs? Is it traditional jobs in government? What is it? And these are undefined. I think, Lyria, we're creating an educational platform for which future students can actually get through and create those jobs.
Well, that's the point. They create the jobs. So the course I was describing is sponsored by a law firm, Gilbert and Tobin.
Right.
They now hire people they call techno-legals.
Okay.
Right? And what is that? It's process innovation within the delivery of legal services. Right? So it's people who can think, okay, how do we do things? And how can we use different systems, including software systems, to make it more efficient, to save clients money, and help gather the reams of documents, sort through documents, maybe automatically analyze text to help draft contracts more efficiently, whatever, right? All of these different things. But that job category did not exist.
Yes.
Right? There was no way that anyone would say that's a thing. But now it exists, and it's a whole different career path.
So I gave a talk on public interest technology about 2 months ago to our student cohort. Most of them are in the PhD areas and Masters by Research. And I was looking for these jobs. I went out there with the intent to share with the school and whoever came what are some of those job titles. I mean, I went to places that I know, like Amnesty International, human rights organizations, the Nuffield Council, all of these kinds of institutes and NGOs that are very important in the world, Human Rights Watch, a lot of privacy foundations. But then I also went to our big companies, and lo and behold, I mean, you've got Google and Facebook out there offering positions in jobs that had the titles like the abuse of data, beyond privacy policy, stewards, looking at things like the misuse of data, integrity and safety of data. These are terms that I know when I went, through an IT degree, came out the other end, were never even thought of.
Well, look at the whole, for lack of a better word, values by design movement.
Yes.
Right?
Let's talk about that.
So you've got, privacy by design was obviously an early player in that movement, but people are now, it is now, adding by design after any value is almost an academic game, right?
It is.
It is. But it's also a real game. I mean, it is also something that organizations really want to do. Whether it's privacy by design, integrity by design, security by design.
Engineering by design. There's papers published in that. Yes.
But the point is, you think about what all of that is about. It's a recognition, I think, of exactly the sort of things we've been saying. That if you want to think about privacy, just to take that as an example, right? And you want to think, okay, how do we think about privacy in a world where our data is being used to put us into little boxes and on the basis of that decide what we should be reading, what we should be doing and how we should be sentenced. But seriously, how do we think about what is required? So one way, which is the way lawyers have traditionally done it, is, okay, we need law, right? We need to prohibit these kinds of surveillance. We need to say you can only use data in these circumstances. And that is an element of the solution, but it's not going to get you there, right? Or you could think about it as a purely technical problem, right? Like you could absolutely think of it as a purely technical problem. Where does the data go? Where's it stored? Right?
Implicit.
And I don't know if that's the answer either. I think that's part of the answer as well, but I don't think you get there. The real question is, for me anyway, how do you build a socio-techno-legal system that we want to live in?
Yes.
Right? And that is the challenge. And that requires the engineers to learn values, the lawyers to learn technology. It requires these intersections to happen so that like I said, you can't solve anything within one discipline. Law can't solve the privacy problem on its own. But by thinking about it as how these systems work together, we can come up with solutions. We're still waiting. I don't know if anyone's come up with it. I haven't seen one yet, but we could work towards it.
So I reckon my friend Jeremy Pitt has a lot of the insights on democracy by design. It's not something he began with in his career, but I've been following over the last 5 to 6 years, where he's looking at, governing principles, knowledge systems coming together, the fact that we can use at the operational level technologies if we have the right sort of values in place in our democracies and in our systems. I gave an opening talk at the Governance of Emerging Technologies and Science this week, and Lyria was also there presenting on how would we phrase it? Regulation.
So my argument was that we're thinking about the governance of AI in the wrong way.
Right.
Or at least a lot of people are thinking
Yes.
about it in the wrong way. That there's a sense in which part of the question we're asking is how do we regulate AI? What do we bring in to kind of constrain it? Or for example, to force transparency on AI and say AI, if you're going to do AI, you have to inform people of this and so forth. And that somehow, the more AI is involved, the more things you have to do.
Yeah.
But that's, to me, not the right question.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, the right question is, say we're talking about transparency of decision making, is not to start with, well, did you use AI or not, right? However you might want to define AI, which is another question. But instead, it's to start with the question of what is the context of the decision and what kind of transparency is necessary in that context. And this is actually something law's done for a long time. I don't have to explain why I chose to wear this top today to anybody. I don't have to be transparent about that decision. But there are decisions I do need to be transparent about, right? So a judge has to be transparent about why they reached a particular conclusion in a court case, for example, and a jury doesn't. So there's differences in different parts of the system about who has to be transparent about what. And if you start from there, you can say, okay, in these kinds of decisions, these kinds of transparency are required. And then, and here's the interdisciplinary bit, what can, for example, machine learning deliver if it was being deployed in the context of that decision? Not to look the same as the human transparency, but to meet the same need in that particular context.
Okay.
And to me, if you ask the question that way around, you get to a better place than, for example, saying, decisions that are automated have to meet some kind of threshold because they're automated.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I want to bring just that back to the bigger picture for a second. We were talking about value-driven design, democracy by design that's been sort of abducted by all disciplines for an intent and all types of values. If we hypothesize or we look into the future and say, well, we're going to get there because we're going to create these engineers who have a holistic view of the world, we're going to create these lawyers who get technology and get society, who get the computational side as well, and we start to create systems based on the existing legal frameworks that we have worldwide and perhaps on the existing sort of human rights principles, although we see them really, there's a tug of war at the moment with machine rights, human rights and so forth. Whatever this world might look like in, say, 10 to 15 years' time, it has to be an evolution of what we have today. We just can't delete the human rights and replace them with something else. We can't just delete our current laws and say, they worked once upon a time, but in the new generation, the new era, they're really meaningless, right? What do you see happening in the bigger systems in the world?
Well, I think there's it's obviously that's a very big question.
It is huge. We're not going to answer it.
We're coming down to the end of the
minutes.
video, so we're not going to answer all of it.
Some of it, please.
But I think you have to think about these problems slightly in layers. So for me, a lot of the work I've been doing at the moment is starting with the rule of law. Now, why the rule of law? Because there's a lot of argument about human rights and certainly a lot of countries don't recognise human rights.
Yes.
And those that do often interpret them quite differently within their own constitutions and so forth. But if you look at something like the rule of law, you look at a basic platform that people pretty much agree with around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Not, again, absolutely everybody, but it is a much broader platform than, say, human rights. Let's just take that.
I agree with you. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And let's see what that requires.
Mm.
What does that require of automation, for example,
Yeah.
when it's being deployed by governments in making decisions that impact on citizens? What does the rule of law require?
Yes.
So that's been a current research project of mine
It's
at the
fantastic.
moment. And I won't articulate all of our findings
Yes.
today or where we're going with it. But okay, so that's sort of the first level. And what's interesting that came out of that project is, and going back to our point about education, is that part of the question is, it's not just about AI yes, AI no, right? It's also about how those systems are designed.
Yeah.
And it's often at where they fall down is at that level of technical detail, right? So you need to understand the technology as well as understand what the rule of law requires. So again, it's bringing things together.
So what about the humans? I mean, a lot of people argue, there's ethics on multiple layers, and people lack ethics. People they can't help themselves. If they've got the data and they've got all this, the question I probably want to end off with is it all technology's fault? Are humans to blame in this process?
I don't think anything is all anything's fault. Like I said, I like to think of the world as and I only have 3 because I lack the disciplines to add more, but socio-technical-legal systems, right? Like that if something is not the way we want it to be, that is, as a system, is something we can change. And sometimes that means we need to tweak the technology. Sometimes we need to tweak the law. Sometimes we need to act differently in the world, right? Usually it's all 3 to make the world a better place. So if we want to think about where we want to get to, we have to understand, at the very least, I think, all elements of that system, and others will add other disciplines and create their own answers. But that is I suppose my goal is to think in that way, but to recognise that this is not something that's out there. This is something, every element of which the law, the technology, and how we behave is actually within our own control.
Well, that's Lyria Bennett Moses today in what I think I might call Coffee with Katina without the coffee. But I've had a great time learning from Lyria, and thanks for visiting ASU, and I hope we can visit you at UNSW again.
And thanks for the great conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you for organising this.
Thank you.